welcome. And yeah, I've been having some off and on internet trouble. So if there's any times where I'm staticky or you guys don't hear me, please let me know in the chat so that I can switch onto my laptop. I'm in Jersey right now, so there was just a hurricane here, and some of the connections have been bad. But we have a fantastic guest today. Euan, he's an angel investor, and he just started a VC fund. So I'm super excited to hear his story. It's funny because we got connected through one of our advisors, but then you also, I think, got connected through AngelList or something to one of our first angel investors, Mike from Toronto. So I'm excited to learn more about your investments and thesis and all of this, and you worked for Uber and all these exciting things. So I'm really excited to dive into this. We're going to give it another minute or so as I let people join, as some more people are coming in, and let me unlock the waiting room here as well. It's a little tricky on my phone, but bear with me and we should be good. Yep, there we go. Okay, wonderful. Well, if this is your first time here, I know we have some people who get invited to these things, or maybe you haven't been able to come on to any of our previous events. This is part of our investor series, so this is going to be part of our podcast, and we will be putting this out on our YouTube and everything for people to watch. But we are a social network for the future of work. So our whole focus at Entre is building this platform for the next generation of business, for entrepreneurs, investors, and freelancers to all connect together in one place that's designed for this next generation of business and the self-employed, flexible work, remote work, making it easier, faster, and more streamlined for people to start and build businesses, and really just make their own path and journey through entrepreneurship, or just joining a cool, interesting new startup. So without further ado, I would love to just jump into this and kick things off here with Euan. And I usually like to start with just, you introducing yourself, give us a little bit of background into, everything that you have a very impressive resume. I'd love to hear a little bit about, what got you to this point, and a little bit about your background and how you got into what you're doing now, which is mostly investing. So Euan, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity to have a chat tonight. We'll see where it goes. So in terms of background, I guess the last 25 years, I've been doing some kind of engineering management role, either program management, product management, or literally engineering management. The last 15 years has been between Google and Uber, and has focused on really trying to take research and move it into the commercial world. So I've done a stint in Google X, working on Glass and Wing and others. And then on some more typical Google products you're more familiar with, like GCP, the AWS competitor. And then I moved to Pittsburgh to join Uber ATG and work on self-driving. And in between all of those, I guess over the last 25 years, I've also had some really, really great travel opportunities to launch projects in countries as far as Southeast Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa, or even Saudi Arabia. So it's been a lot of fun, and I've personally learned a lot. So anyway, happy to share anything I can.
Yeah, no, it's super impressive. I definitely want to dive into what you took from your experiences at these, some of the largest companies and fastest growing companies in the world today. And right now, we're going through strange times, obviously, but if you can, I'd love to hear some of the insights you've gained, and maybe the the key takeaways you learned from Google and Uber, if there were any that set you up to be a great angel investor and look for these certain things in other startups.
Yeah.
Are there anything that's come to mind?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing is execution, right? And execution risk. Because if you work with any engineering team in any company, whether it's in a 5-person startup or when I joined Google, I think there were 16,000 people. There is always this over-optimistic view of when we'll get something done, right? And the real-world dependencies start unraveling, and then things go wrong in many different ways. And so seeing that happen again and again and again and again from the best engineers, the best managers, the best leaders, and then seeing if I can, both from a diligence point of view and from a coaching point of view, work with startups to help identify the things that I've seen, the patterns where things go wrong when you plan against your execution roadmap, and get ahead of those. So I think if you ask for the one biggest thing, it's that. Definitely analyzing execution risk and helping mitigate future problems.
Interesting. That is the one thing that I've really learned, especially over the last 6 months, even just with Entra and in growing our platform, is execution is everything. And everybody has great ideas. A lot of people probably had similar ideas to some of the largest companies in the world right now, but what made them become the largest companies was that their execution on it. Is there anything that because our audience, those listening right now, and for those of you watching too, please, if you have questions, we are going to do a Q&A at the end, but for those watching now and then who are listening on the podcast and on on social and our YouTube, who are starting out, what can they, are there any 1 or 2 things that they can do to execute better? Is it being super organized, having priorities, project management tools and strategies in place? What are is there 1 or 2 things that you've seen work really well to mitigate the risk or to help people execute better?
Yeah, I mean, self-organization is just table stakes, right? You have to do that. And the basic principle to follow is when you start repeating tasks, automate it somehow. Whether it's, you have a stack of papers to your right, and instead of that, you could actually have a nice folder structure, something as simple as that. But I would hope most people are beyond that stage. And when it comes to kind of unraveling complexity in all the things you have to do to deliver to a business objective, the most effective approach I found, and the most simple, is just to ask yourself, be your own devil's advocate. Ask yourself questions about what could possibly go wrong. And you've probably, from the more product-minded of you, you've probably heard of, I think it was Marty Kagan who came out with the idea that when you're releasing a product or when you're forming the concept of a product, write the press release for what the public should learn about, or your customers should learn about, this new shiny thing you're introducing to the world before you specify it, right? So you are approaching it from the customer perspective. And similar from a risk mitigation perspective, write the postmortem. What hypothetically went wrong because you didn't write this postmortem, right? And ask yourself those questions. I mean, a concrete example, most people now use machine learning as an ingredient into any software project. And let's take an example of supervised, where you need to create labels. So it's very easy to sit down and think, yeah, okay, I need to create the algorithm to train the data. I need a data set, and I'll acquire the data set, I'll train it, it'll be okay, maybe a couple of iterations. So let's call it 3-4 weeks. So break that down and think, okay, what data do I need to collect? Let's take self-driving as an example. Well, I need to collect data that shows me traffic cones on highways. Okay. So once you have the data, then I can train the model, then I can test the model, and then I can iterate. So the types of questions you should be asking is, who's going to collect that data? What would stop them collecting that data? Do they have other priorities? Is it maybe raining or snowing? What's the weather like over the next couple of weeks? Do they have, what is the mean time to offloading that data, to then uploading it, to then analyzing it? What if the labeling team go offline because there's a storm? How often has that happened? Just keep finding ways for things to go wrong. And then you'll get a really strong sense of if what you're about to do is achievable in the time you have to do it, and then start cutting scope, time, or resources.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I mean, that's great insights. And I mean, obviously in Pittsburgh, there in Uber and self-driving cars, there's a lot of variables there, right?
May or may not be true examples.
So, no, that's fantastic. But I mean, even just like, that's a great example. And then just even building, we've noticed it, with everything going on right now, because we have, our team is very, scattered throughout, the US and also the world too. And, there's different parts of the world that are much worse than others. And, there's all sorts of things from power outages to, internet connections going down and whatnot, and unreliability and all sorts of things that come up. So being aware of different variables that could happen. And then I think just getting a good idea up front and being very particular about, and being honest too with how long this is going to take. Not being from a technical background myself and, building a tech product, and relying on my team to tell me timeframes, it's really tricky. And, that was one of the hardest things, because they would set, timeframes that they might think that they could do in the fastest time, but it was like, hey, don't give me the fastest, give me a more conservative, so we can plan around other features and rolling out different things to the public. I think it's one of the biggest things. So thank you so much for I don't know if you want to add anything else onto that too.
Yeah, I mean, that there is a good example of strong leadership, because you set the tone that you're expecting a conservative estimate that incorporates what could go wrong, what probably will go wrong. Whereas another gotcha is when I guess more fresh managers come out and say, well, that's not good enough. I need it done in this time frame, not this time frame. And no, you can't just magically hire people or pay more money for more services, or you can't adjust anything. I want what I asked for in a shorter amount of time, go and figure it out. So then what happens is they come back and say, we're good enough. We can do that, and then either they just write really bad code and incur tech debt, or they hide when they have or have not delivered something. And so it sets a tone of fear, and then the culture just goes downhill.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, execution and patience are literally the two things that I see as, I would throw consistency in there as well. But those are the biggest things I've learned, over the last 3-4 years now. And it's so hard, because as the entrepreneur, you want to do things as fast as possible, but you also have to be realistic and make sure you don't roll out something of less quality. Like you mentioned, I think quality in today's day and age is becoming more and more important than ever, because there's so many apps, there's so many technology out there. If it's just generic, simple breaks, people aren't, they're not okay with that anymore. When, earlier when things were very new, people were okay with, things maybe not looking super pretty as long as it functioned or certain other things. But now people have used so many apps and technology. I think the barrier to entry, you need to be, impressive from even at the beginning, at the early stages in some cases. But I'd love to, shift a little bit now to your, and it was really cool to hear this. I wasn't really expecting to dive into that, but I think it's a really important thing for early stage founders to understand. But I'd love to get into your investment thesis now. Share a little bit about some of the companies you invested in, if you want, in your portfolio, and a little bit more about the types of companies you're looking for, the startups you're looking for, industries you're interested in, and tell us more about your new fund and Reinforced Ventures.
Yeah, certainly. So Reinforced Ventures, I established in December last year, and have been growing it since then. It's just to be clear, it's not a fund, it's a syndicate. So it's an angel syndicate where
Gotcha.
I have a bunch of angels, LPs in venture land, who evaluate the analysis I put in front of them and choose whether or not they want to opt in and contribute. Then we pull the people that want to contribute into one fund and then provide that to the founder. So the founder is insulated from, in some cases, 40 LPs that I'm working with, and just see the one line on their cap table and one interaction with Reinforced.
Now, real quick, is that this is through AngelList, and is it a rolling syndicate, or are you within a time frame? Because I know there's some that they kind of have a time frame set up for them, more like a traditional fund, but others are more of like an ongoing rolling syndicate.
Yeah, it's what you would term as a rolling syndicate. It's not closed end. So
Great.
Only when there's an appropriately well vetted opportunity that I'm really excited about, I'll share it with the syndicate. But there's no pressure to just produce them.
Right. Wonderful. So I'd love to have you share more about if you some of the companies that you invested in, and then why you invested in those, and some other companies or industries that you're interested in as well.
Absolutely. So the thesis, so to speak, is the future of commercial infrastructure, including autonomous systems. So what I mean by that is, if you picture the world or yourself in 5 to 10 years, we'll all be doing things very differently. And the things that we're doing differently as it pertains to how we work are the companies and startups that I'm fascinated by. I'm based in Pittsburgh, and a lot of the emerging centers of excellence in Pittsburgh pertain to that. So we have obviously a lot of autonomous mobility services, self-driving cars, etc., autonomous robotics here, a lot of emerging, very interesting B2B platforms. So there's a lot here. I don't necessarily focus or constrain to Pittsburgh, but there's just a great network here that I'm working with. In terms of examples, I want to connect to a point we discussed earlier about mitigation of risk and where things can go wrong, because that's something, as I said, I look for, right? And this one company, it was slightly later stage than we would typically invest in, but I was so compelled by what they're doing. It's a company called Locomation, based in Pittsburgh.
I think Phil actually just
worked for them. Yeah,
he so I don't, some of you might know Phil. He's one of our advisors, and Euan's good friends with him as well. But he actually just went to, I think he's their CFO now. No, it's a really cool company. I love. Yeah, feel free to share more about it.
Yeah. So the what's interesting about Locomation is that apart from their product, which I'll go into, at this early stage, the team is very, very important, almost more important than the product. The product can change. The team had worked together before. They had worked together in NREC, which came out of Carnegie Robotics, which came out of CMU. And so as a unit, they have experience working with each other, arguing with each other, sharing a beer with each other, understanding processes between, design, testing, verification, iteration, etc. So they've done all this before. So they've they've come, as a unit and formed this company, Locomation, with all this experience under their belt, not only as roboticists and mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and software engineers, but all of that cross-section of skill sets having worked together. And that de-risks so much in the world of execution, because you already know they're not going to turn around and just have a huff and walk out, or not know how to get to decisions so they don't procrastinate. And secondly, on the execution front, and as it pertains to Locomation, they've built autonomous systems before. So you're buying experience and you're buying a team that knows how to work together. And those two things are very, very rare in a startup. Going back to what they do, most interestingly, so Locomation produce basically autonomy as a service to the freight industry. So they produce what's known as level 3 autonomy that allows freight trucks to follow closely behind each other. And in the not too distant future, they will have paid autonomy as a service out there with some of the larger carriers in the freight industry, which saves on fuel, on driver costs, on driver shortages, etc. So it's very exciting to be involved in.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on with the freight industry, and I think we're just at the tipping point with it as well. Where there's actually another local founder in Pittsburgh. He actually owns Pizza Fiesta, and then he also has a trucking business on the side. And he's starting this new platform called Freight Mates, and he's really just focused on matching truckers with loads, but doing it the opposite way as like Convoy and some of these larger ones, where the truckers are actually in a position of to say, hey, I'm available, and what's your offer to me. So it's pretty interesting. But I think, yeah, there's a lot of really massive opportunities in that space, especially with autonomous and logistics and figuring that out. I think there's huge potential there. And Pittsburgh's a fantastic place. JL, yeah, it's called Locomation. I think it's spelled exactly like how it sounds. And yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh's like the best place for AI and robotics right now. So you're probably in a good place for your thesis for sure. Now, are there any so getting back to some of, you mentioned execution being a big part of it from your other angel investments and stuff. Now, what are maybe other things besides you mentioned team execution? Are there any other things that you're looking for in early stage founders or startups that are, you seem like you're obviously more of a niche focus with autonomous and, robotics and whatnot, but are there any other key factors that you've noticed that translates to success, right? Even from your experience at Uber and Google as well, besides team and execution, are there any other factors that you've seen work really well?
Yeah, I think when you come across a founding team that have a personal frustration with something not being solved in the world, and it's not about forming a company and getting a nice title and maybe an exit. It's about it just has to be solved, and they'll do it in the most efficient vehicle to do that in. And usually, it's because the company they're working in or the organization they're associated with just either doesn't have the time, budget, or interested to do what they want to do, right? So that then forms a startup, which usually has all the expertise, energy, and understanding of the problem space that is needed to go off and tackle that problem. So when I see that in a founder, and if it really does correlate with a deep understanding of what they're up to, if it's technical or non-technical, they still need to have that deep understanding of the market and where the world is heading towards. And like a concrete example of this is a passion I share with a founder called Scott Richardson, a company called Up Content that we invested in, and they are a marketing technology company, if I was to generalize. And there's where I see the future going is if you think of, so we started out with like Twitter and Facebook, right, as a way for just the average person to socialize digitally, right? And then LinkedIn kind of very slowly came up and was a place to post your resume, and now it's a very active forum to discuss more professional topics, whereas Facebook, you know, you can have arguments over going back to school policies or you know, random stuff. But LinkedIn is obviously for the professional version, right? But still, what's missing is individuals, typically within companies, right? If you think of name any big brand, I don't know, Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola will make press releases, but they'll be very formal and they'll come from the marketing or the PR department, right? And maybe they'll appear as an ad or as a LinkedIn article, whatever. But what's missing here is, what about the trillions of people who have the expertise, the passion, and the insight to actually write those articles which are relevant to their circle of professional friends and acquaintances, right? LinkedIn only gets you so far as an audience. And the, you know, both from a publisher and a consumer point of view, it's quite constrained. So what Up Content does is allow you to source a relevant article, curate it with your opinion, your expert opinion on, you know, whether it's true, whether it's not true, you know, where this feature is headed, and then push it out through all the various digital platforms. So what actually happens is that if you were to see where this is going in the future, large companies will be self-perpetuating in their own brand and allow their employees to be building their own brand, right? While helping the company's brand, because they have this social need to share their expertise and their opinions. And that platform doesn't exist outside of Up Content. So I'm extremely excited to, I think excited is the wrong word. It has to happen. The world needs this because we're missing so much expertise and passion from the, you know, the average employee that's not pushing out content today.
Yeah, I think it's really, really cool. I was checking it out earlier. I came across them, I think, a couple of years ago when, I mean, obviously I'm from Pittsburgh, but I you know, spend a lot of time in other cities and stuff. But, you know, I think the future is definitely curated and quality over like quantity and, you know, volume, if you will, right? I think everything needs to start going more towards curation, quality, and all of that. And I think this has a really good opportunity to help with that. You know, it's a big part of what our focus is with Entre as well, because as you know, the entrepreneur mindset and lifestyle, whether they're in a startup or solopreneur or small business or a freelancer, it's very different than the corporate professional lifestyle, the 9-to-5 lifestyle. And that's a lot of what LinkedIn has to offer. For us, we're building a similar functionality-wise platform to LinkedIn with some more features, but it's curated more for the self-employed individuals than the employed job seekers and stuff too. But I think regardless, a platform like Up Content, it kind of gives everyone that ability to either, you know, create high quality content and then have a way for it to get distributed out through people, you know, and with a lot of automation added into it as well through their platform. So it's really, really cool. It's just upcontent.com if anyone wants to check it out. Yeah, it's really, really cool. So yeah, I think, you know, we've hit on a lot of great points here. Another question I always like to get into, especially with everything going on right now, is kind of the current state of the market, right? Obviously, some industries are getting crushed. Others are growing like crazy. What have you seen? What are your thoughts on all of this that's going on? Are you, you know, actively still investing? Are you still looking for, are you looking for certain areas to invest in? What's your thoughts on just the current state of the market and everything right now?
Good question. So I'm not specifically looking for any trends, so to speak, that are emerging out of COVID, because I think those are perhaps jumping on a bandwagon or too obvious, therefore too late. I'm sticking with what I understand. In terms of what am I seeing in the market, I'm actually seeing a mix of no change to an uptick in investment activity. I could procrastinate all day long about why that may be, but it's probably narrow and subjective for me to do so. But clearly, the public markets, everyone thinks are going to crash tomorrow, but then they just go up again tomorrow. So maybe putting money there isn't something that people are doing. Gold is obviously maybe considered overpriced now, right? Bitcoin, I don't know where your opinion on that is. So investing in startups which are basically isolated from the crazy, right? Because nothing's going to happen for 6 to 10 years. So they are heads down building product that will emerge in a few years and start to get traction. Are well isolated, so it's a good place to put your money from that extent, from that point of view.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think the public market's been a bit crazy and volatile, and I think if you're spot on with the startup in the direction that you're going in anyway, you're going to end up being successful regardless of what's going on right now. In some cases, obviously there's certain industries that are going to be really tough to weather the storm right now. Like retail or travel. It's just, there's not much you can really do.
Cruise ship booking systems isn't something I'll be looking at in the near term.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's interesting. How have you been dealing?
Just to add on to that, I mean, to your point on trends or not trends, in the areas that I was previously looking at, there are emerging trends that are interesting in that obviously autonomous vehicles become more attractive because you don't have another human to deal with, but then that's a good few years away. But then all the autonomous robots that are now in demand, autonomous cleaning robots, autonomous UV shedding robots for clinical medical areas, et cetera, right? So it's interesting to see that the technology, which was previously less exciting, is now viewed as a lot more exciting, when the only thing that's happened is the environment around it.
100%. I think robot stock is through the roof, right? Everyone, because it makes it easier. You don't even have to worry about anything with robots. It's just them, it's doing the job. So I think there's going to be a huge transition to mass robot production and use, especially right now. I think it sped up the process that was probably going to take another 5 years to, probably a lot of companies are thinking about it right now and trying to implement it very quickly. That way they don't even have to deal with a lot of the human element of it. So no, it's really fascinating. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what you're doing right now to meet startups and just general networking and connection, right? Obviously there's, this is just strange because you can't go to events. It might be difficult to meet certain people, or take meetings with investors and things like that, or to meet other founders and stuff. So how are you meeting startups? How are you meeting, people right now, networking? Do you have any tips for founders on how they should be reaching out to investors and stuff right now?
Yeah. So answering the first question, how am I finding startups? So I was super, fortunate in timing that the second that I started taking this more seriously and launched Reinforced Ventures, I was hitting the pavement every single day. and building, I hope, authentic relationships in person by going to certain incubators and CMU Schwartz Center and physical locations like that, where there's just a hub of activity around startups, and meeting all the founders I could, and the directors and educators and anyone that's involved in that space. And I even threw a few events myself with Reinforced Ventures and ex-Googlers and anyone that's interested in the community. We came together, talked about a few important issues, and then swapped, did the whole networking thing. So that gave me a basis of networking to start with, and having had a few investments that went well, I think the founders had a good experience with Reinforced Ventures. So we got recommendations from that. That meant that actually I was able to accelerate my discovery of good companies, because I didn't have to travel. Travel was not expected. It wasn't rude not to go and see someone in person anymore, right? So now I can cram the day full of these experiences and meetings and relationship building. Excuse me, get rid of this.
They're getting you on everything.
That should go away in a second. All right. I apologize.
Oh, good.
So, in terms of founders, so the question was how should founders network in this day and age? Actually, I will reuse advice that was on a previous entre, Beth. I've forgotten her surname, but she was from a VC. And she said that it's the third degree conversation you have, or the third degree network experience you have, where you may know someone well, they introduce you to someone, and that person introduces someone else. It's a third degree. And statistically, that's where you start to see opportunity meet your need. And I would say the lesson in that is just to keep going, meeting more people who, when you find a connection and a reason to meet the people that maybe you should talk to Jim, who is working on a very interesting startup. Then take the opportunity, ask for that warm introduction, and then keep following the breadcrumbs. Just keep going.
Are we? Sorry, you sped up there at the end. I think we're good though. But yeah, no, I think everything that you're saying, the third degree connections, follow the breadcrumbs, it's one of the main reasons why I love doing these events, and why I encourage almost every founder to join our not just our events, but other events that are going on. Right now you can't do in-person events, but you can hit, on any given day, there's probably 3 to 5 entrepreneur or startup, some sort of events, live podcasts, live streams, webinars going on. And we try to make ours pretty interactive, and we do a lot of different types of events and stuff. But everyone who's watching right now or listening later, they're getting very, amazing insights from you. They're getting to know you, and they can probably follow up with you, after this, or at least, have a way to say, reach out. Just in your example with Beth, Beth is with First Smart Capital. They're one of the top VC firms in New York. And, that opens the door now for us and people in our network to, have that third degree connection now with someone like that, just from attending an event or reaching out to us. One of the things that we're doing too, coming up, is we're going to have an ongoing funding application, and I'll send you the link for the database too. But basically, all the investors that we have on, we give them access to this database of all the startups that are applying for funding in our network. And then the investors just let us know which ones they want introductions to. So it's a great way to help at least streamline this process a little bit. And right now we're kind of acting as, somewhat of a middleman, but we want to automate this process with our app and the technology we're building. So startups can apply for funding in one click, and investors can just get a notification, from a startup that fits their criteria too. So you'll never get an application from a startup that's not in your wheelhouse, right? So you may only want to see, pitch decks or, applications from startups in AI, robotics, or whatever, and also just companies in Pittsburgh. So the only applications or notifications you're going to get is XYZ robotics company in Pittsburgh is applying for funding, and you can just look at their business profile right on the app, and then you can just accept or decline an introduction with them. So we think that this is going to allow not just a better way of doing it from the startup side, but also on the investing side. And we'll be able to act as an automated matchmaker for this as we scale, because right now we almost have 2,000 users, but we have entrepreneurs from already 65 different countries that have found us online, and we haven't really even launched yet. So there's going to be a lot of information that we'll be able to figure out as people are coming on, what industries they're in, what stage they're in, all of this stuff. Same thing as we grow our investor database. So I think there's definitely there's been a missing link. It's been very scattered, but I think networking, like you were saying, extremely important. And I think figuring out those third degree connections, expanding beyond your existing network is so critical. Have you noticed any correlation to that with the successful founders and startups that you've come across, or even just successful people that you've worked with, being that the ones who are making these third degree connections or master networkers and really getting out there, that they are able to grow their network, which is in turn helping their startup?
Absolutely. I think the variable here is time and where the focus needs to be. But let me give you a pure example. I know a venture partner who is looking to raise funding for their new fund, and he is a demon at fundraising, because he will go out and talk to anyone and talk to that anyone friend and anyone friend, and he will follow the breadcrumbs for hundreds of miles. Literally, he does, and he does very, very well. And he finds the right investors for their fund. But I think, just going back to, if the audience here is primarily founders and they're looking for how they can get to understand and meet investors and the right investor, honestly, most investors value, obviously they value the founders they've already invested in, right? So they're already working with the founders day to day, they know them personally. And when said founder emails an introduction or makes a recommendation to a specific investor, I guarantee you it will be read and taken very, very seriously. And so the best way, I think, to meet investors, in parallel to perhaps using the Entre marketplace when that is available, but is make sure you meet as many founders as you can, because that's an easy conversation, because they're your peers, right? You're not trying to sell or buy anything to or from them. So the conversations come easily. And then just ask them, once you have a reasonable relationship, who do you think is the best fit as an investor for my company? And then that founder, if they have been funded, will probably have, even in the early stages, a Rolodex of, 5 to 15 investors they know pretty well, and will be prepared to make that warm intro on your behalf. And that's powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm glad you brought that up, because definitely talking to other investors through our events and stuff, that's definitely been one of the common threads for sure, is other founder introductions goes a long way in their eyes for sure. So we're going to get into some Q&A here. So if you guys have any questions, now's the time to ask them. So throw them out in the chat. And I want to ask one more question here before we get into the Q&A, but please ask questions, and we'll get wrapped up here, because I know we're getting close to 7 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of your time, because this has been amazing. So one of the things that I love asking too is, kind of how have you had any like mentors that have impacted your life? If so, what are some of what are one or two of the main lessons you've learned from them? And then maybe some other, learning resources, books, podcasts that you listen to that you think would be good for founders.
Sure. I actually think that everyone is my mentor, and I can learn a lot from everyone. So I kind of move less from finding one like idol to teach me their wisdom, and draw wisdom from the behavior and reactions of people all around me every day. That said, it's not very helpful to this audience to hear that. So I think something more helpful is someone I used to work for in Google. He was a senior guy, and at the time I was pretty junior, and so he was giving out like half day of shadowing, which I grasped and I took, and basically sat with him for half a day and understood how he thought, and how he handled situations in various meetings. And first thing I learned is that there is no ivory tower, right? The more senior you get, the harder you work. That's the rule. There isn't more senior you get, the less you do because you're more senior and you can just boss people around. That's obviously naive. The second thing I learned is the value of time. And when, for example, he was going into a meeting, he had a strategy. He had a purposeful role to play that he wanted to drive the conversation to a very specific outcome. And if you think about it, we all have, tens in a high double-digit number of meetings via video conference these days, right? And if you honestly ask yourself, what percentage of those meetings are you just turning up and seeing what's going to happen? Probably be over 50%. If next week you try and turn that to every single meeting, you have a plan. What would make it? What would improve in your life or in your business if you achieve that outcome in that meeting, and then just go for it, and then start kind of, there's an echo, start taking your score, right? And then iterating and improving. So anyway, those are some thoughts on mentoring.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I was switching back over to my laptop here. No, I think that was great. And we had someone else ask a question about a book as well. Are you a big, it looks like from your background, you're a big book guy. And do you have any recommendations on great books for founders, or in that matter, videos, podcasts that you think are important for founders to listen to or learn from?
Yeah, it depends where you're at. I just to generalize, I really like autobiographies, because you learn how a person thinks in many different situations, and there's just so much you can learn from that and apply it to different situations. And I'm actually going to lift the laptop up, because underneath it is a book, which is just out actually, and I haven't read it yet. But this is for the more technical minded. If you're looking at leading engineering teams, this is proving to be a collection of what I think is really well distilled engineering leadership knowledge of how to run technical teams, and whether it's a kind of DevOps, SRE, software, hardware engineering, all the things that typically go wrong, and how to plan for them and how to design for them. So
very cool. What's the name of it?
It's it's called An Elegant Puzzle: Systems of Engineering Management by Will Larson.
Interesting. Very cool. I lost the question, but I believe it was because when I switched over, it went away. But I believe, and I forget who it was I was asking it, but it was, what is your hot button or signal that makes you want to make the investment? Obviously, we mentioned earlier, founding team, being really critical, the ability for them to execute, and maybe showing some examples that they can execute, and being part of this kind of futuristic, niche. Are there any other, indicators, or when do you know that you're going to make the investment? I guess if that might be a better way of putting it.
Well, I think actually the first question is an easier answer. When do I know I'm going to make an investment? Is so many factors go into that. So the easier answer of like, what is the hot button? I think it's when a few things. One, you learn through. In my case, I like to interact with a founder for maybe a month, 2, 3, 4 months before I decide to invest, to understand who they are in the team and what they're building thoroughly. And so when you start to see that this founder, frankly doesn't care who you are, I may have a strong opinion on something, but they are fixated. They know what they want to solve and how they want to solve it. And yes, they'll take feedback and, accept assistance in the areas they know they have a gap in, but otherwise, they are going for it. And if what they're going for aligns with your idea of the future, then that's a match made in heaven. That's the best part of any investor's job, is when you find those opportunities, because then it's just pure excitement and intellectual stimulation.
Very interesting. I think, Sandra wants you to repeat the book one more time, but I think that's fantastic insights. And at the core, entrepreneurship, solving problems, right? So I think it's a huge part of it. And go ahead with the book one more time. I don't know if she was able to see that.
I don't know why I didn't type it in the first place. Or maybe that.
Yeah, that might be easier because it was a pretty long title. But yeah, I mean, I think that about does it. We're right at 7:00. So I know you're extremely busy, but I really enjoyed this. We'll send you all the info and the recording and everything for you to share with your network. And I would definitely love to stay in touch. And when all of this is a little bit normal again, let's definitely link up in Pittsburgh for sure. And we can definitely continue the conversation. And I'd love to introduce you to other, some other startups too that I think might be a good fit for you. But is there any final words, any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Where can people find you, or follow up with you, or connect with you? Are you a big LinkedIn guy, Twitter guy? What's your where should people find you?
LinkedIn, I think, is the easiest for everyone. Euan Guttridge. There you go. I'll write it again here. Everyone. I think there's only one of me on LinkedIn, so that's easy enough.
Yeah, you don't have a. Here, I can drop it in here.
In terms of like final words, I think one thing that really resonated with me, and these are not my words, I think I stole them from someone, is that, if whatever you do scales, and that could be you meet a partner, you have children, your family is scaling, right? It could be your business is scaling. I think things change around you, and it's naive to try and get, your family or your business to commit to a certain product or idea or vacation or whatever the thing is, right? But what you can do is get everyone to commit to each other. And then, it's obvious what happens in that context in a family situation, but in a professional situation, if you can achieve that, then your team will achieve anything, because you will change what you're going to do. And that's, I think, one of the key things I've learned. It's hard to do, but if you can do it, then the sky's the limit.
Wow. I love that. And I think that's a great place to wrap things up. So Euan, really appreciate having you on. For everyone who was joining late or whatever, I want to drop a quick note to, if there's anything that we can do to help you guys, feel free to reach out to us. You can sign up and connect with the other entrepreneurs, investors, and freelancers in our network at just joinentre.com. We have a mobile app, and you can sign up on our website for free too, now that we just launched our web version. So Euan, thank you so much for being a part of this. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you everyone who stuck around, and we'll be dropping the replay also on our YouTube channel if anyone came in late or missed any of it. But thank you guys so much, and take care, and let us know if there's anything that we can do to help.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask, yes. Thanks, Euan. See you guys. Thanks so much. Bye.